We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Gimel Amud Beis in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 43b. On the previous Amud, Rabba paskind, if you have a situation where an animal is not going to be stoned, let's say the animal kills a person, but kills the person shelo b'kavona. So in that case, for example, the animal is not going to be stoned. So if it's a case where the animal is not going to be stoned, there is no kofar payment as well, because the two things are related to one another. You're only going to pay the kofar payment if the animal is put to death. And so Abai asked a question on Rabba from a Mishnah. The Mishnah says that if a person admits, by admission he says that his shore killed a person, so in such a situation, there is going to be a payment. However, if he admits that his shore killed an Eved, where there's a fine of shloshim shkolim, so there the person is going to be patur from that payment. Now, the simple explanation of that Mishnah is that just like at the end of the Mishnah we're talking about the knas, the fine of the 30 shekel, so too at the beginning of the Mishnah we're talking about the kofar payment. And if we're talking about the kofar payment, it is saying that you're you have to pay the kofar payment, even though in that case the ox is not going to be stoned, the ox is not going to be put to death, because it's a case of admission. And so the Gemara then Rabbi answered that it could be, you could potentially answer that at the beginning of the Mishnah, we're not actually talking about the kofar payment, but we're talking about the payment of just regular damages, because when a shore kills a person, if you have a situation where you're not going to pay kofar, but you still have to pay damages for that. So we're talking about the damages over there, it has nothing to do with kofar. But the problem is the end of the Mishnah seems to not be talking about damages, it's talking about knas. So at first Rabbi said I could answer an answer that is dochik, a forced answer, and say that the beginning of that Mishnah is talking about damim, it's just talking about monetary damages, even though the end of the Mishnah is talking about something else, it's talking about knas. But then Rabbi says that really I can give a better answer and say that the entire Mishnah is actually talking about damim, it's all talking about money for damages, and we can explain the Mishnah in the following fashion. Miu nevertheless, ben chorin de mishalim kofar al piatzmo. When it comes to a ben chorin, meaning when it comes to a situation where the animal, the ox, killed a free person, so in that situation you pay kofar. There is a situation there where you do pay kofar al piatzmo, you do pay kofar by admission as follows. Vehechi dami, what would be the case of that? Di also sahadi v'asidu bei de katal. Let's say you have a situation where witnesses came and they actually testified that the ox killed the person. So you are going to put the animal to death in this case. Again, Rabba's whole halacha is that if the animal is not put to death, then there is no kofar. Here you have witnesses that say that the animal killed and therefore the animal will be put to death. So in terms of that, there should be kofar. However, where's the admission? V'lo yadi itam have imud have, but we just happens to be, we don't know whether the animal was a tam or muad. V'yamar more de muadhu, and that's the admission. The owner says that it actually is a muad, and I need to pay kofar. There, even I agree, says Rabba, the mishalim kofar al piatzmo. I agree that in that case, a person does pay kofar al piatzmo, and so therefore we could be talking about the kofar payment. There is a scenario, and therefore says Rabba, heicha deleka edim. Therefore, since there is a scenario where kofar can be paid, now that's not the scenario the Mishnah is talking about, because again, Rabba is interpreting the entire Mishnah is talking about damim. But since in theory there is a scenario where through admission you can pay kofar, so therefore heicha deleka edim, if it's a situation where there are no witnesses, now you're not going to have kofar because the animal is not put to death, mishalim damim, but then at least there would be a payment of damim, there would be a payment of monetary damages. So the beginning of the Mishnah is talking about damim, and you pay damim by admission in a situation where there's no kofar. But gabe eved, however, when it comes to a situation of an eved, meaning the animal killed an eved, she'eino mishalim knas al piatzmo, there's never a scenario where you pay the knas, you never pay the shloshim shkolim by admission. So therefore, if you're never going to pay the fine under those circumstances, vehechi dami, what would be the case? The parallel case, the asu edim v'asidu bei de katal. Let's say again, witnesses come and they testify that the animal killed the eved. V'lo yadi itam havi muad havi. We don't know whether the animal was a tam or a muad. V'yomar mori, and the master says muad, who would say muad. So lo mishtalim knas al piatzmo. There, you're not going to pay the fine because you never pay a fine by admission. Even though again, in the parallel case by kofar, you do pay kofar. So since there is no scenario in terms of the parallel case where you're going to pay knas when it comes to the eved al piatzmo, so heicha deleka edim. So then, where there are no witnesses, lo mashalim damim, there will not be a damim payment either, meaning you're not going to pay a damages payment for the fact that your animal killed the eved, and that's how we can interpret the whole Mishnah has to do with damim and has nothing to do. It does not go against the rule of Rabba. It could be that Rabba's rule is correct, that if the animal is not put to death, so then there is no kofar payment. And so it emerges now, according to Rabba, that when a shore kills an eved, there is never going to be a damim payment. There's never going to be a payment for damages, even in a scenario where you're not paying the knas of shloshim shkolim. And so the Gemara now says, Meisiv Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak asks on this from the following brisa. The brisa has a rule, Kol shechayev beben chorin. Anytime you're chayev if the ox kills a free person, chayev be'eved. You're also going to be chayev if that ox kills an eved, if that ox kills a slave. And that's true bein bekofer, bein b'misa. That's true whether you're talking about the kofer payment. That's also true when you're talking about misa, when you're talking about putting the animal to death. And so the Gemara now says, Kofer be'eved mi'ika. Now, we can't be talking about Kofer here, because there is no Kofer payment when it comes to an Eved. So you can't be saying you're chayiv Kofer by an Eved. That can't be what the brisa means. Elalav damim. Rather, is it not talking about damim? It's saying any scenario where you're chayiv to pay for monetary damages by a free person, you're going to be chayiv to pay monetary damages by an Eved. That goes against what Rabba just said. Rabba just said that we don't pay the monetary damages when it comes to an Eved. Again, let's say you have a situation where there is no knas, some situation of admission. Again, Rabba said, since there's never going to be a knas in that situation, so therefore in that situation as well, there is not going to be damim. That goes against this brisa. And the Gemara says, Ika diamri, there are those that say, Hu mosiv lava hu mefarikla, that he asked the question and then he answered the question. And Ika diamri, there are those who say, Amar le Rabba, that Rabba is the one that answered the question. In any case, the answer is as follows. Here's what the brisa actually means. Hachi katani, this is what the brisa means. Kol shechayev beben chorin bekavana. Anytime you have a situation where the animal kills a free person and it does it intentionally, al pi edim kofer, and you're going to be chayiv in such a situation. Let's say edim testify that that is what happened, so we know you're chayiv kofer. So chayiv be'avid kanas. So in that scenario, you're going to be chayiv. Let's say it wasn't a free person, you're going to be chayiv by an eved to pay the kanas, to pay the fine of shloshim shkolim. V'chol shechayiv beben chorin shelo bekavana al pi edim damim. And anytime you have a situation where by a free person, let's say it's not with intention, and so therefore, al pi edim, you're going to be chayiv to pay damim, you're going to be chayiv to pay money. So chayiv be'eved shelo bekavon al pi edim damim. So then you're going to be chayiv by an eved if it happens again without intention through edim to pay damim. Now that works okay with Rabbah, because here we're saying only in the situation of shelo bekavon al pi edim that by an eved you pay damim. But again, by admission, because that was what Rabbah said, when it comes to any situations of admission, so there you do not pay damim when it comes to eved. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rava. So Rava said back to him, Ihachi, if so, if that is the case, so isho shelo bekavan. Let's take a situation where a person makes a fire and also does not have intention, and again it kills somebody. So al pi edim nishalim damim. If it happens al pi edim, if that happens through witnesses, it should be the same logic. We should say that you have to pay monetary damages. And Rashi explains, Yachi, if so, deshoro shelo bekavan al pi edim. If you're going to say that when it comes to a shore, let's say it kills a person without intention, and there are edim, the less a b'toras kofer, where again we're saying that since it's shelo bekavana, the animal is not stoned, so there is no kofer, but still mishalim damim. But still you have to pay damim, you have to pay monetary damages. Kevan sheyesh damim lemisas adam b'makom shein kofer. So if we're saying that you have to pay monetary damages when you kill a person in a situation where there's no kofer, uknas, or in a situation where there is no fine, so then we should apply that same logic to Eish as well. Isho nami, the less a b'toras kofer, when it comes to Eish, where there is no concept of kofer. If you have a situation where you make a fire, you cause a fire and that causes someone to die, there is no kofer payment. But l'shalim damim shelo b'kavana, but if it happens without intention, so then the person should pay money. Because again, there is an idea of nezikin, of damages when it comes to fire. Umiu b'kavana. Now Rashi says, why are we talking about shelo b'kavana? Even b'kavana, there is no kofer by Eish. We should talk about damages if the fire kills a person. Rashi points out that if it happens with intention, pshita londa pater, then it's obvious that you're pater from paying monetary damages to kamle b'deravimine, because there we apply the rule of kamle b'deravimine. The person is going to get the death penalty for that, so of course he doesn't pay damages. But in a situation shelo b'kavana, where you don't have kamle b'deravimine, you don't have the death penalty, so there should be monetary damages. That's the question of Rava. And the Gemara says, well, maybe that's true. Maybe in such a situation you do pay monetary damages. The Gemara asks, so Rava, where does Rava know the lo mishalim, that you don't pay that payment of damim? How do you know that's the case? Maybe you do pay damim. And the Gemara says, ilema miditanan. If you're going to say it comes from the following Mishnah, Rava understands you don't pay the monetary damages from the following Mishnah. Haya gedi kapos lo v'evet samach lo. Let's say you have a situation of a goat that's tied up nearby, and there's an evet over there nearby, v'nisraf imo, and then it burns together with it, so then chayiv, he's going to be chayiv to pay. However, evet kapos lo, but if the evet is tied up, ugedi samach lo, and the gedi is nearby, v'nisraf imo, and it burns together with it, pater, in that case, you're going to be pater. And Rashi explains, haya gedi kapos lo legadish. The case over here is, you have a stack of grain that's on fire, and you have the first case is that there's a goat that's tied up nearby, so chayiv agadi, the point point over here is you're chayiv on the burning of the gedi, via godish, and you're chayiv on the burning of the stack of grain. Upater al eved, but since the eved in the first scenario is not tied up, he's pater and paying. Let's say the eved gets burned, the hayalo livroach, because the eved should have ran away. But eved kapos lo gedi samachlo. But let's say the other way around, the eved is tied up and the gedi is nearby. V'nisrafu imo pater. In that case, if it all gets burned, he's going to be pater. Because sava Rava. Now Rava understands this Mishnah means hi pater a eved ugedi kamer. When it says pater over here, it's on everything. Person's pater on the eved, the person is pater on the gedi. A eved mishum de'ein tashlumin laeved ela b'makom knas. Now why are you pater on the eved? Because there is no payment for an eved in a situation where the only time you ever pay is if there's a knas, if there's a fine b'shor hamud, by a shor hamud. V'agedi mishum dehayalo levrach, and then you're pater on the goat as well because it should have ran away. Avol mishum de kamle b'derabmine. But Rav is saying that in terms of kamle b'derabmine, maybe you'll say, well, since he's chayiv misa on the eved, so therefore that's the reason why you're pater. Lo pater le, no, he doesn't make him pater in that case, because the kasavar isho mishum emono, because he holds that Eish over here, this fire, it's not like a direct killing. You're not chayiv misa. Eish is considered like mammon, it's considered like a person's shore. Ve'ein kan chayiv misa, and there is no chayiv misa in this case, and that's why Rav is understanding over here that the reason why there's no tashlumin for the eved is because there is no tashlumin for an eved unless you have a situation of a fine, unless you have a situation of a knas. And so the Gemara is suggesting that maybe this Mishnah is Rava's source, that when it comes to Isha Shalo B'Kavana, there is no dam in payment. Because again, this Mishnah is similar. There's no Chiyav Misa because it's Isha Mishum Mimono, and we see there's no dam in payment. Same thing is true by Isha Shalo B'Kavana, where there's no Chiyav Misa in that case as well. And again, there's going to be no dam in payment, but that's a question. Because if we're saying Shoro Shalo B'Kavana, Al Pi'edim, where there's no kofar, there's a dam in payment, why isn't there a payment by Eish as well when it's Shalo B'Kavana? But the Gemara continues, this cannot be Rava's source because of Amar Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish said that's not how you understand this Mishnah. Rather, the way to understand the Mishnah is Kagon Shehitzis Begufo Shel Eved, that actually what the Mishnah is talking about is the person actually lit the body of the Eved directly on fire. To Kamle B'derabmine, that there is Kamle B'derabmine. The reason why you're not chayav to pay money over here really has nothing to do with the fact that there is no dam in payment. It has to do with Kamle B'derabmine. So this Mishnah cannot be the source. And Rashi explains, Reish Lakish didn't Reish Lakish say B'Parakeitzad earlier in the Masechet, Kagon Sheheitzis Begufo Shel Eved. The case again over there is actually he lit the Eved directly on fire. De'ikol Chiyav Misa, that it actually is talking about a situation of a Chiyav Misa. V'Afilu Agadish Nami Pater Le, and he's completely pater even on the stack of grain. Mishum de Kamle B'Derabmine, because there is Kamle B'Derabmine, and therefore this Mishnah is not relevant at all to the situation of Isha Shelo B'Kavana. And so the Gemara continues, Ve'elamei Hadatanya. Rather, Rava's proof is from the following brisa. The brisa says, Chomer be'esh mi b'bor, that when it comes to Eish, there's a stringency over bor. Sha'esh muedes lechol bein davar haroila, bein davar she'ein roila, that when it comes to fire, we say it's considered a mu'ah to consume things that are fit for it or things that are not fit for it. Ma she'ein kein b'bor, we don't apply that to bor. V'ilu sha'esh meshalemes shelo b'kavana damim ma she'ein kein b'bor lo katani. But it doesn't say in this brisa that Eish pays shelo b'kavana damim, and that's not true by bor. And the fact that it doesn't say it, so that's the proof of Rava, that when it comes to fire, you don't pay damim when it's shelo b'kavana. And Rashi explains, Ben Dover Shein Roila, again the Brisa says that when it comes to fire, it doesn't matter, it could be something that's not normally consumed by fire. Lichra Niro v'sichsecha avonav, let's say you're talking about a plowed area, let's say you're talking about stones. V'ilu sho'ish mishalemes shelo b'kavana, but it doesn't say in the Brisa that Eish pays shelo b'kavana, meaning the leka deravamine, where you don't have kimle b'deravamine, damim. It doesn't say that it pays damim, masha'ein came b'bor, and that's certainly not true by bor. Why? Depater bei misas adam, because we know when it comes to bor, that if a person dies in the pit, you don't have to pay, it's pater. Dechsiv shor v'lo adam, because it says shor v'lo adam, it says the word shor, and we darshan not a person. So lo katani, that's not in the brisa. So maybe that's the source. Maybe that's where Rava knows again that when it comes to Eish shelo b'kavana, that the person does not pay. And the Gemara says to that again, that's not necessarily a proof, because Dilma ton of a shire, because maybe this brisa was teaching one stringency of Eish overboard, but left out the other stringency. That wouldn't be a proof just because it's omitted. And so the Gemara says, Ela Rava gufe abuye meboile. Rather, to Rava, this was actually a question. Isha shelo b'kavana, he was asking it as a question. Let's say you have a situation of Eish where it kills a person shelo b'kavana. Again, there is no kimle b'deravmine, there's no chiyav misa. Mi mishalim damim olo. He asked it as a question. Do you have to pay the monetary damages or not? Mi amrinan, do we say gabe shorhu, when it comes to an ox? Divakavana mishalim kofer, where if it happens with intention you pay kofer. Shelo b'kavana mishalim damim. So if it happens without intention you pay damim. That's true by shor. Avalisha de bekavana lo mashalim kofer, when it comes to fire, where if it happens with intention, there is no kofer payment. So shalo bekavana nami lo mashalim damim. Maybe when it happens without intention, so also there is no damim payment. Odilmor maybe kavan degave shoro shalo bekavana. Since it's true that by shore, if a shore is shalo bekavana, afagav deleka kofer mashalim damim. In a scenario where it's shalo bekavana, where there is no kofer, you pay damim. Gabe isha nami. So maybe we apply that to ish as well. Afagav de bekavana lo mashalim kofer. Even though bekavana there's no kofer, but shalo bekavana mias mashalim damim. Maybe if it's shalo bekavana, you do pay damim. Velo yadinan, and we don't know. So teiku. So the Gemara says we leave that as a question. And Rashi explains that Rava gufei hada osiv le'el isha shalo bekavana. When Rava asked this question by ish shalo bekavana, lav de pshita le de lo mashalim. He didn't mean to say that it's obvious that you don't pay damim. Uvitiyuvta ma'isila. He wasn't saying it as a refutation. Ela b'loshen baya isila. He was just asking a question. V'hachi kamer le Rava l'Rabba. Rava was saying to Rava as follows: Ihachi de shor shalo bekavana she'in kofer yesh damim. If you are saying that by a shore shalo bekavana where there's no kofer there is a damim payment, so isha shalo bekavana mai. He was asking it as a question: what's the halacha by ish when it's shalo bekavana? And the Gemara continues: Kiyasa Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi came, Amar Rav Yochanan, he said that Rav Yochanan said kofer. The pasuk says there's a concept of a kofer payment. Matamad lomar im kofer. Why does the pasuk say im kofer? L'rabos kofer shalo bekavana ke kofer bekavana. What this comes to include is even if you have a situation of shalo bekavana, meaning to say where the animal is not put to death, still the kofer payment is made, just like a situation of bekavana where you pay kofer. And essentially he is arguing with the position of Rabba. He's saying you pay kofer in all scenarios, whether the animal is put to death or not. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Abaye. So Abaye said to him, Elameata, but according to that, Eved Nami, when it comes to a slave as well, Ma Talmud Lomar Im Eved. Why does the pasuk say Im Eved? That also seems to be some kind of a drasha, some kind of an inclusion. L'rabos Eved shelo bekavana ke Eved bekavana. We'll make the same drasha. It should come to include an Eved that's killed shelo bekavana, just like an Eved bekavana. V'chitei mahachanam. And if you're going to say indeed that is true, if an Eved is killed by a shor shelo bekavana, you still pay the exact same payment. V'amar Reish Lakish, but that's not true. Reish Lakish said, shor shehemis eso Eved shelo bekavana pater mishloshim shkalim. That if a shor kills an Eved shelo bekavana, it's pater from the 30 shkalim. And the Gemara says to that, Amar Lei said back to him, Gavra karamis. You're asking one person against another. In other words, it could be that Reish Lakish does indeed say that, but who says that Rabbi Yochanan agrees? And the Gemara continues, Kiyasa Ravin Amar Rabbi Yochanan. When Ravin came, he said that Rabbi Yochanan said, Eved matamad lomer. What does it say? When it says the word Eved in the pasuk matamad lomer im Eved. Why does it say im Eved? L'rabos Eved shelo bekavana k'Eved bekavana. Exactly this idea. It includes an Eved shelo bekavana is the same as an Eved bekavana, and you are going to pay the shloshim shkalim. And the Gemara says Reish Lakish nami, but according to Reish Lakish also, Neima mida Eved im Eved lo darish. Let's take Reish Lakish and say, well, he's clearly not darshaning the extra im Eved, because Reish Lakish is disagreeing, and Reish Lakish is saying that an Eved shelo bekavana doesn't pay the 30 shkalim. So kofer im kofer nami lo darish. So let's suggest, according to Reish Lakish, he doesn't darshan the im kofer as well, and he would disagree with what we said above. He would say that when it comes to kofer shelo bekavana, you would not pay kofer in a case of shelo bekavana. And the Gemara says, Amri, the answer as follows: Lo, it's not true. Eved im Eved lo darish. Reish Lakish does not make the drasha of im Eved, but kofer im kofer darish. But he does make the drasha of im kofer, and therefore he does agree in terms of kofer. He says when you have a situation where the animal kills shelo bekavana, still the kofer payment is made. And the Gemara says, Umaishna Eved im Eved. And what's the difference by Eved, the im Eved that he doesn't? Lo ksib b'makom tashlum. And the difference is that when it comes to im Eved, that phrase is not written in the area where it's talking about payment. However, kofer, im kofer, however, when it says im kofer, ksiv b'makom tashlum. And that's written in a place where the pasuk is talking about payment, and that's why we make the drasha in that fashion when it comes to kofer. And Rashi explains, Im kofer ksib b'makom tashlumim, the words Im kofer are written by payment, to svara, to l'ribuya achrini, also l'tashlumim. It makes sense that it's including, in terms of another scenario, that there's a payment, to l'gufei lo itzrich, to havle l'mechtav kofer. Again, it could have just said kofer. Im eved lo ksiv gabe tashlumim, the words Im eved are not written by payment. Ela gabe negicha, it's actually written by goring. The pasuk says, Im eved yigach, u'l'gufei itzrich l'chalik ben eved l'ben chorin. The pasuk is actually simply needed to make a distinction between a free person and an eved, and therefore you don't make the drush in the same fashion when when it comes to im eved. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "V'chein beben, v'chein bebas." The same is true if a shor kills a son or a daughter, meaning even if the person is a katan, is a minor, the halacha is going to be the same. And the Gemara says, "Tanu Rabbanan," the rabbis taught, "Oven yigach or bas yigach." It says again, if it gores a son or a daughter, l'chayev ala katanim kegedolim, to say that you're chayev whether it's a minor, just like if it is an adult. And Rashi explains, l'chayev ala katanim skila, meaning the animal is going to be chayev skila, whether again the person that was killed is a minor or whether the person that was killed was an adult. And the Gemara continues, Valo dinu, and isn't it logical? Hoel v'chayiv adam ba'adam, since we have a chiyav, let's say a person kills a person. V'chayiv shor ba'adam, and we also have a situation of chiyav, let's say a shor kills a person. Makish chayiv adam ba'adam, just like when a person kills a person, we say the person is chayiv misa lo shna, it doesn't matter, it's no difference between katanim l'gadol, it doesn't matter if you kill a katan or a gadol, you're still going to be chayiv misa. Afkish chayiv shor ba'adam, so too when a shor kills a person, and we say the shor is chayiv misa, lo tachluk bo ben katanim l'gadol, we don't make a distinction between minors and adults. V'yod kal v'chomer, and furthermore it's a kal v'chomer. Uma adam ba'adam shelo asa bo katanim kegedolim. If when it comes to a person killing a person, where we actually don't treat minors like adults, if a minor kills somebody else, we don't say that the minor is chayiv, but chayiv bo ala katanim kegedolim. But still we say that if you kill a minor, it's the same thing as killing an adult. And Rashi explains, v'halo dinu v'lo tzarich kra, you don't even really need a pasuk for this. Hoel v'chayiv misa ba'adam ha'horeg es ha'adam. If somebody kills a person, you're chayiv misa. V'chayiv misa shor b'adam, and if a shor kills a person, there's a chayiv misa. Lo chilakta bein neheragim katanim l'gadolim. We don't make a distinction if the person killed is a minor or an adult. D'chsiv ki yaka kol nefesh adam afilu katanim emashma, because the pasuk says kol nefesh adam means to say even when we're talking about minors. Ma'adam ba'adam shelo asa rotzeach katan kegadol. And then the Gemara said further, when it comes to a person who's a minor that is the murderer, that is the one who killed, so there we don't treat that katan the same as a gadol. D'chsiv v'ish ki yaka ish v'lo katan. It says that a person is the one that kills, not if a minor is the one that kills. It has to be an adult. But chayev bo ala neragin katanim kegadolim. But if the one that's killed is a minor, it's the same thing as if the one that's killed is an adult. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Dalid Amud Aleph.